Hey friends, welcome to episode 4 of Coffee with Andrew. If you hear some beeping in the background, that's the plows outside helping us with the snow that was dropped on us in Fargo here. Just a heads up there. But this week I'm excited to share with you and hopefully encourage you and bring value to you through helping you overcome bad habits and replacing them with good habits. And so I just want to start with the verse from the Bible. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And so this is huge. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Don't just keep doing what you're doing, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12:2. So the word transformed is actually metamorpho in the original language, which is where we get metamorphosis, which is going from a caterpillar, to a cocoon to a butterfly. There's a process there. And so when we renew our mind towards good, we go from living just a crawling, just trying to make it through life, kind of life, to a life that we're free. A butterfly, we're free and we have a whole new perspective. We see things from a larger perspective rather than just a narrow-minded focus and perspective. And so we have more of a larger, and we see the world from a fresh point of view. And it's a lot better when we renew our mind because, so it's just beautiful. So the cool thing, the interesting thing about habits is habits, they create paths in our brains. Neuron connections from neuron connections. So let's say a trigger, just like a gun, press a trigger, bullet goes out. With a thought or a trigger, you press that thought or that, or external trigger, or internal, those thoughts, you press that then leads down to a path in your brain. And if you're not intentional, you just keep doing the same thing that you're doing. It's a habit, which eventually could lead to addiction. If it's a negative habit, it leads to addiction. It's kind of like you go into the woods, you see a deer path. You can see there's a path there, but it's kind of like, it's not really developed and actually kind of hard still to travel upon. But then you look at, a four-wheeler path, super easy to travel upon, but it wasn't always like that. And that's an addiction, whereas the deer path, that's a habit, but it could develop into that other path, which is, on the other hand, could develop into a very beautiful, really awesome habit, which it would be, and it's easier to travel upon as well. And so there's two types of negative triggers. It's external, internal. External trigger is like you wake up, the snooze, the alarm goes off, press the snooze button. That's a trigger. You do not want to wake up, so you press the snooze button. Trigger. You have not stopped it. It's a habit, and you press it maybe 7 times, and then an hour and a half goes by that you really want to spend that time, reading, or praying, or making a good breakfast, whatever it is that you wanted to do or work out. But you didn't. An internal trigger is something like a father wound, a feelings of loneliness, insecurities, coping mechanism, even a reward system that we just don't even do anything about. It just happens, and we're not intentional about. And so how do you create new triggers? This is where the rubber meets the road. How do you create new triggers? So a negative trigger, what happens from a negative trigger is you then have an uncaptive thought, which leads to a selfish desire, which leads to a selfish action, which will eventually lead to destruction in our lives. With a positive, they be the same trigger, so the alarm goes off, same trigger, rather than doing the same thing you've done before, maybe you do a prayer. For example, instead of pressing the snooze button, you actually roll onto your knees out of your bed and you start praying. And then that leads to that thought being captive of, I just want to stay in bed, whatever it is. And then that leads to a selfless thought, which leads to a selfless desire, which leads to an abundant life, a rich life, intimacy with the people around you in relationship with you. Not just with pressing the snooze button, that is a huge deal, but also in every area of our life when we create healthy habits, good habits. And so how do we do that? First off, we got to be aware and we got to be willing of our habits in our life. Secondly, you cannot say no unless you effectively say yes. You can't just say no to a bad habit without replacing it with a good habit. You can't just say no to this one path and then just stay at the fork in the road. You need to choose the other path. And that's important. Where do you want to end up in life? What do you want to be said about you, at the end of your life at your funeral? That's huge. It's what will be said there will largely be influenced by the habits you create in your life. And so you can't effectively say no unless you effectively say yes to something else. And I always think about this difference between Bruce Banner and the Hulk. You need to be aggressive. You can't just be Bruce Banner in these things and being this, he's smart, but he's like a little, just doesn't have a lot of strength, and he's just kind of making it. But then when you are trying to attack bad habits in your life, you need to be the Hulk. You need to transform. You need to really be aggressive with these things. It doesn't take one time of overcoming this. It takes, actually some say 63 days to actually overcome a bad habit and create a new habit in your brain. So huge. And so even with where I'm at in my life is, I got married in last May. I became a pastor in September. We have a painting business. And so a lot more responsibility, probably 10 times more responsibility I've ever had in my life, leadership responsibility. And I recognize this is a leadership tip for you is that as you're a leader, your habits don't only affect you anymore. It affects everyone that you're leading. It goes from the top down. If you have negative habits, it will affect everyone that you're leading. But if you have healthy habits, it will affect everyone that you're leading in a good way. And so if you're a leader, this is even more important. But if you're not a leader, if you are heading into leadership and you're still having these negative habits, I'd rather you develop healthy habits before you become a leader. My prayer has always been, God, give me the character that will always exceed my title, my leadership. And character is developed through developing healthy, godly, loving, selfless habits in our life. And so I want to encourage you in that. And just once again, be aware, be willing. Cannot effectively say no unless you effectively say yes. And stop being Bruce Banner and start becoming the Hulk. Be aggressive with these things. And so I know this is really short, and this is probably going to be a whole book or a whole movie to talk about these things. But I thought I'd just get you started in this new year. So God bless you, and I hope you have an incredible week.